Welcome to the Around the Table podcast, where we believe that there is room for everyone at the table. At the table, there is fellowship, growth, and learning. So pull up a chair and join us around the table.
Hey everyone, this is the Around the Table podcast. My name is Lindsay Tubleville.
And I'm Stephen Warnock.
And this is our very first episode that we're recording.
That's right. First ever podcast episode. Pretty exciting.
Yeah. And so do you want to tell the people why we're calling it Around the Table?
Yes. Around the Table has a lot of significance actually because when we were talking about doing this podcast and what it would be and what it could become, my thought, I guess, in my heart behind it was, I think this is a lost art in our culture today, especially in the West, but maybe worldwide, is just the art of getting around the table with people and having conversations. There's something different when you sit around a table and you're able to share your heart, you're able to talk about topics, even difficult things, even challenging things. They need to be done around a table because we live in a culture where texting and email and social media messaging, anything where I don't actually have to get in front of you, to share my opinion or to share my thoughts. And what that creates is the ability to read tone, the ability to read intention and frustration and stuff into something that may not even be there. But when you sit across the table from somebody, you get their body language, you get their heart. It's a real person now. It's not just, an angry voice somewhere. It's a real person that you can talk to and get their perspective. I think I heard this recently is that even in the household, like most parents don't even get 3 minutes of eye contact with their kids per week.
It's interesting.
Which sounds insane when you think about it, but like most times when people are at home, they're not around a table to look into each other's eyes and talk. And so it's a concept that's both literal and metaphorical of we want to come around the table where people are welcome around the table. We are welcome to have an opinion. We're welcome to bring conversation and share things or talk about things that may be challenging or maybe life-giving. But it's the idea of just getting around the table, both in relationships and in your family.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to be, it kind of forces you to be honest too about what you're thinking and what you're saying. And because like you said, there's no screen to kind of block that. You're able to be vulnerable and be truthful about what you think and what you're saying. And it's something that I think about too, as we were talking about the name for it, for Around the Table. I thought of the table of the presence, which is in the tabernacle. In the Bible, it talks about that before you would come to the Holy of Holies, that you would come to the table of the presence. And there was the table of showbread. Yeah. It's where you encounter God's presence. And so while I think this is really good that we're going to be talking about family and other things as well, we'll also encounter God too at this table.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing that actually happens around tables is you eat, right?
Yes.
And your boy likes to eat.
Amen.
Amen. And maybe one day on the podcast we can actually eat, although the listeners may not like that.
Crunching.
There's something about
sipping.
The sound of someone eating that's horrible. So let's not talk. Maybe we won't do that. But
maybe not.
But there's this picture of, like you said, the table of showbread, the table of presence, and the Word of God is meat, it's bread. Jesus is the bread of life, and so hopefully we'll get to partake of a lot of bread in this podcast.
So. Yeah. What are some things that we'll be covering as we move forward with the podcast?
Yeah. So really, I would love for it to be things like you're gonna talk about around the table. If I was sitting down with somebody, to have conversations about life, to have conversations about family, to have conversations about culture. How do you engage your family in the culture? How do we follow Jesus in this culture? What does it truly mean, to be a follower of Jesus? And again, even those conversations, they need to be had around a table.
Yeah.
They don't need to be just something that's a blog out there you go read, but you have to get around the table with somebody and be in their world and see their life to learn how to be a follower of Jesus. And hard conversations, again, get easier. So we'll talk about a lot of that stuff. We'll talk about maybe some topics that guest speakers or friends of mine that are going to come in and talk about. I hope to have some of them on the podcast and maybe touch on some things in their life that they've become great at, or I would say, you could say, well, are experts in, but only because they've been living it for a while.
Yeah.
But so I think that's a good picture of what's to come.
Mm-hmm. Some Q&As too.
Yeah, for sure.
For people that have questions and stuff like that. And I don't know if you already said it, but extra topics that maybe we haven't had a chance or doesn't fit on a format of a sermon on a Sunday.
Yeah, we'll dive a little bit deeper into maybe a series that we've been in, or maybe a message that we hit that we felt maybe was resonating with people, and we needed to talk a little bit deeper about it. So there could be some bonus episodes if the Lord is leading us in a certain area, or if there is a specific like cultural event or a current affair issue that we need to really speak into to help our body in this time. So
we could start talking about where we're going to go next. So we're coming out of our Summer at New Covenant quote series, which is not really a series.
Series that's not a series.
A series that is not a series. But where are we going next? And where are we going next?
Yeah, we'll be. I'm not sure when the airing of this podcast will be, or when it'll be released fully. But we are going to be going into a family series, and covering a lot of different aspects of family, from past things, current things, and future things, in relationships and family and parenting and marriages and all that kind of stuff.
So some of the topics that we're covering are, did you just kind of, did you feel
I
like
mean,
you
I don't know
listed
how
it
much
out?
needs to be a
Or you want to surprise
wait and
them?
see.
Yeah.
Or if we should just, lay it all out there. But really I can maybe share a little bit more about the reason for this.
Yeah.
topic.
Why do we need a family series?
Man, this could be a long conversation. Probably won't be today necessarily, but we need a family series on a regular basis because, one, God is a God of family. He chooses to work in and through families. He chooses to work generationally. He chooses to describe his people as a family, the family of God. And so family is his design. Family is his heart, but family has been so broken in our culture that we have a very hard time understanding really the family of God, because we don't understand what a healthy family looks like. And so, you want to talk about the pain in people's life, it really all revolves around family. It revolves around past, things from their childhood with their father or their mother or siblings. It involves the pain of a broken marriage. It involves the pain of children who've been wayward. I mean, you look at the pain points of people's life, and it's going to eventually break down to the family. And a lot of what we see, I think a lot of the problems we see in our culture today, a lot of the brokenness, why you see a lot of people that continually have perpetual problems or end up in jail or are on their 6th, 7th marriage, it's because of the attack on the home. It's because the fatherlessness in our culture. Yeah. Even I had this conversation with a group of men this morning that I'm kind of mentoring, but we talked a lot about like, what does it mean to be a father in the home and to still be present? And what's worse, to have a father that wasn't at home growing up, or to have a father that was home and still not present? Yeah. Like, I mean, there's so much of that. So, I mean, we could go into a lot regarding just the brokenness of the home, but really I think if you were to boil down kind of my heart for a family, is that to help people see that the home was meant to be the place of spiritual formation, that spiritual formation was supposed to happen in the family first. And over time, what's happened, especially in the West, maybe worldwide, but I can only speak for the area that I live, is that people have replaced their responsibility in the home with the church. They've tried to, or another organization, the school to teach my kids, the church to train them in biblical ways, yet nothing that happens inside the church will long-term override what you're doing at home. Yeah. And really, so that's really my heart, is that families would return to, metaphorically and literally speaking, the table in their home, where there would be formation, there would be conversations, there would be, discipleship, and really relational health and growth back coming from a place of a healthy home. Yeah.
So would you agree? I guess you probably would. The reason why we see such a, obviously the world has fallen, but like a good portion for why I guess the West, like we struggle with people remaining in the Christian faith over time. Like I think it stems a lot from like the family unit not being strong and knit together in unity. Would you agree with that?
To some degree, yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody technically, everybody will be responsible for themselves at some point. However, when you were talking about longevity, I can't remember the exact statistic off the top of my head, but the Jewish faith had the highest rate of kids who would stay in their faith as they grew up. And I believe that's in large part because of really the traditions that they had revolving around the role of the mother and the father to teach their children in the biblical ways at home, and really their close-knit, strong families. People of faith, a lot of practices around faith, a lot of spiritual disciplines around faith, whereas in the West you see that role is not really the same at home. So people's kids, if we would just want to be real and honest, people's kids watch their parents grow up faking Christianity, and then they say, I don't want any part of that. And it's not on the kids, it's on the parents.
Yeah.
It's on the parents for not sacrificially loving their spouse, for not themselves growing in the Lord and taking it to their kids and feeding them out of what they were being fed themselves.
Yeah.
Like a mother bird would regurgitate into the mouth of their children. It's an ugly picture, but really the mother bird goes, gets the food, comes back and feeds the babies. That's not happening in the home right now. And so I think it's just really an indictment on the adults in our culture. But I mean, they could go back to their childhood and look at the same principles. It comes a repeating cycle of I watched my parents not really live it, so I didn't want a part of it. And then I started having kids and thought, well, you know what? I should probably get them in church.
Yeah.
So we come to church to get our kids into church. We really don't have a relationship with God. And so then the cycle keeps repeating.
Yeah. So this kind of brings us to the next point, which is that some of us, like, who've been here for a little while and have seen you with your dad and your mom and even your brother and your family, like, we kind of get a taste of like what it was like for you. We can see the fruit of your life in your home as a kid. But would you mind describing what your family life was like growing up as a kid?
What my family life was like?
Yeah.
You mean like?
Yeah, like what
because of being like pastors, or just like
no,
what was it like outside of that?
I don't even think that it's necessarily like important. I mean, like that's your life. Like your dad was a pastor, but I'm not even talking about that. Like as a father and as a mother, what was it like growing up with them? Like how did they model their parenting for you?
Yeah, so let me start by saying there are no perfect families.
Yeah.
And there are no perfect parents. Okay, so if you are listening to this and you're going, well, if I grew up in that household, or if I grew up in that, if those people were my parents, when you're kids, you always wish you had somebody else's parents till you go over there and you realize, never mind.
Yep.
My parents are all right. But there's no perfect families or perfect parents. All there are imperfect people who are continuing to get better as they serve God. So growing up in my family, I think the fact that, we're pastors, my parents were pastors, played a part, not in a part of how they raised me, because one of the things they always would reiterate to me is we're doing this not because we're pastors, but because we're followers of Jesus. Like, we don't not go see these types of movies because we're pastors, but because we're Christians, So they would always reiterate, this has nothing to do with our role in leading the church. This has to do with the fact that we are followers of Jesus. So that always reinforced to me that there's a standard of morality, there's a standard of values that followers of Jesus were supposed to have based on biblical values, not because there's no super Christians, there's no professional Christians, there's just Christians, there's just followers of Jesus. So I'm getting into kind of what it was like, but they were busy like every other family was. Parents were trying to start a church, and my mom started a school. So she was leading a school, he was leading a church, yet they were very intentional about trying to make time to be at home, to be at events and those kind of things. I don't know how detailed you want me to go, because that's
you don't
enough
have to
to
get
go.
like too detailed, especially because I know once we start getting into the series, like on the platform, you'll share things and people will hear about it. But I think just the overview, knowing that they're not perfect. I don't think anybody believes that, or at least I hope not. But
you'd be surprised how some people just assume things, and it's like, nah, it's not.
Yeah. So, but I think just the general overview, like knowing that they're not perfect, but they were striving not to be obedient to God because they're pastors, but because they're Christians, and we're all called to be obedient and to be the best parents that we can be. And so, because of that, how did that affect? So you have 3 kids.
I have 3 girls.
3 girls.
Yep.
And so, how did that affect you and how you're raising your own family and building your own family unit?
Yeah, I have 3 beautiful girls, Rachel, Emma, Claire, and they are 13, 11, and about to be 9 in a week. So
I'm actually impressed that you remembered their ages. I'd like to note that there's sometimes, like, whenever I ask men specifically, I never seem to have this issue with women, but I'm like, how old are your kids? And like, I think she's 5. I'm like, oh, great, wonderful.
Well, do the women answer in months still? Because I know
Sometimes.
For a long time they're like, she's 422 months. And you're like, okay, at what point do we switch to years?
Well,
12 is when I did it, but Tandra would be like, she's 28 months, and I'm like, just say she's 2 years.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry.
I do have 3 beautiful girls, and we're kind of entering into a new season with our oldest being a teenager and navigating like how to walk through that next season of her life, which could be some of the greatest years of her life, to transition with her, because as they transition as a parent, you have to transition in the same rate that they are, and not treating them like they're 5 anymore. But so how has it affected, us? Well, one, like when we first got married, Tandra and I got together, and we talked about like, what are the things that we liked from each of our families growing up? What are the things that we wanted to do differently? And we took those and we agreed together, like, hey, these are some things we want to continue, and these are some things maybe we don't want to replicate. And I'm sure our kids one day will go, hey, these are some things that my parents instilled upon us we really like, and these are some things we don't want to replicate. And I hope that amount is smaller than the ones they do want to. But what really helped me was some of the same language, right? So I used that same language with my kids. I did not want to be a pastor. I was not going to be a pastor. It was on my list of nevers. And so when I became a pastor, I was like, oh man, like I'm going to have pastor's kids, and if you know anything about pastor's kids, they can be
hit or miss.
Hit or miss is a funny way to say it.
Yeah.
They either serve the Lord or they go extremely the opposite direction. There's not a lot of like middle ground pastor's kids. And to
All
be fair, there was a season where I do know a lot of guys that and girls that were pastors' kids that twisted off, but I know a lot of really amazing kids who turn, actually most of them are pastors now, and they all didn't want to be. But what helped me was I have like language and context for my kids. So like Rachel and Emma, they're a little bit older now, and I've been able to tell them, look, Dad was a pastor's kid. So I know all of the things you're going to go through. I know all the thoughts you're going to have. You've not probably had a thought that I have not had as far as, oh, I'm a pastor's kid, and so I reinforce the same thing my parents said is, we don't do this because we're pastors. We're choosing, we would do this no matter what we did because we're followers of Jesus. That's why we do this. And so I think that language has really helped me in raising my own kids. And hope to have the same consistency.
So I feel like this will be an easy question, but was it easy? Is it easy?
No.
Yeah.
Was what easy? Being a parent, being a pastor's kid?
Building your family.
No, it's...
so it really didn't matter, I mean, in a way it did help, but it's not that it made it easy for you to be a parent.
No, I mean, look, being a parent is not easy. If you have kids, you know this. If you want to have kids, you need to know this. It's not easy. Like when you have a baby and they send you home from the hospital or wherever you have the baby, you're like, there's no way I can take care of this human being. I don't know what to do. There's not a manual for this. And I mean, there is and there isn't, but no, it's not easy. It's super hard, but it's super rewarding. But it's super hard. I just want to reiterate that it's super hard.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. So for those, so great. You had a really great childhood, or I don't know, whatever. But some people
My childhood was whatever.
No, it sounds great. It sounds really good. But there are some who they don't grow up in that. They don't grow up with models who, number one, are good parental models, but also not great models of what it's like to be a Christ follower. And so they may come to the series with like almost a filtered lens over it, like, well, great. Well, I still didn't have a model for that. So easy for you to say, but I still can't do that. But would you say that it's still possible for those people to have the kind of family that we're trying to describe for people with this series that we're coming up to?
Yeah, I mean, 100%.
End of story.
Yeah, well, the hope part of it is, yes, you can have a great family regardless of your background, regardless of whether you had good examples, regardless of whether you grew up in a single parent home, regardless if you grew up an orphan. I mean, all of those things are definitely challenges that work maybe against you in the initial stages, but that's the whole purpose of God sending Jesus, so that we would not be orphans anymore, so we would understand the fact that we were adopted into his kingdom, and he becomes our father. You know, my dad, he grew up with a bad father, an abusive father, and so he had no model to really look at. The guy that I called grandpa growing up was not his real father. And he was a good dad, but he definitely he wasn't a Christian, so he wasn't really instilling. He got saved later in life after my dad was already a pastor. So he didn't really instill like biblical values and didn't really show a lot of affection. I mean, he was a good dad because he was present, but in the young years of my dad's life, they had to get away from my dad's real father because he was abusive to my grandma and to him. And so he had to learn to be fathered by God, and he was a good father to me. And so he's a testimony, I think, for many people who didn't have a father growing up, had a bad father, had a bad example. You let yourself be fathered by God, and you learn how he loves us, and you just reciprocate that same love for your kids, even though, again, it's challenging, but that's what makes, again, the spiritual family of God so valuable is the deficits that you grew up with. You can put yourself around other families, other mothers, other fathers that are great examples, and you don't have to figure it out on your own. You know, you can say, hey, I want to learn. Tandra and I do this to this day. Like, we are constantly going to people that we look at their lives and go, man, look at their marriage. I want a marriage like that. Look at their kids. I want kids like that. And we'll call them up and be like, hey, our kids are crazy. And they're like, no, they're not. You're doing a better job than you think you are. And then we say, how do you do this? And they give us great feedback on it. In moments we feel overwhelmed. And we had a good family, which means that if you didn't have a good family growing up, you're going to have those feelings. You just got to know who to call. Yeah. And you can't know that, I don't think, unless you put yourself in the family of God. Yeah. And the reason I say all that is because I want to give you hope. You know, it's very common today that I would venture to guess, and you probably hear a lot of this in the series, but I would venture to guess that I don't know if half, but a good portion of the people that come on a weekend to one of our services are in a blended family. And, you know, that blended family has become more of the new norm. And while it wasn't, I believe, God's original intent and design, it's not his perfect plan, so to speak, you can still have a great blended family if you submit it to God. And that really is the issue, is if you submit your life to God, you lay down your past hurts, you know, and the fear of it turning out that way, and just trust him and let him teach you, let the family of God teach you. Yeah. You can have a great marriage. You can have a great family. You can be the one that reverses everything in your family lineage to where now you're the beginning, you're the seed from the fruit that's going to come forward. Yeah.
I liked what you were saying about even you and Tandra, like, y'all had really good childhoods with great parents and you came from good families, but even to this day, like, you're still asking people, how do you do that? And you've got a 13-year-old, so like, you've been in this game for a long time and you're still asking.
It's a long time.
There's going to be people that will come to this series and they have a healthy family. Yeah. And so what can they expect to get out of the series?
Well, hopefully healthier. I would assume that they have a healthy family because they are still working on it. Yeah. Like there's no such thing as a set it and forget it aspect of our lives. If anybody you know has a healthy marriage, it's because they're daily working on it. If anybody you know has a healthy family, it's because they're daily working on it. Yeah. It's because they're saying, to use the language of sports, they're saying, hey, we're going to run this play for a while, and when this play quits working, we need to change our strategy. And they change it, they game plan for how they want to go into the next season of their life. So if you have a healthy family, like, man, that's amazing. First of all, great job. Sometimes you don't know if you have a healthy family though, till you keep learning some things and you keep seeing some things, but keep learning, keep growing, and then bring people, bring other people to it that you can invest in and pour into. I mean, the whole goal is replication. Like the whole goal of marriage is multiplication of yourself, that you reproduce and you raise godly offspring. Well, that never stops. Even if you have a healthy family now you start investing into other healthy families, and that's reproducing yourself into them.
I look forward to family series because Adam and I, we're young married. That's my husband, by the way. If you don't know, my husband is Adam Tubbleville. And we've only been married 4.5 years.
Has it only been 4 years?
Oh my goodness, what year?
See, I knew my kids' ages.
Yeah.
And you don't even know how long you've been married. No, I'm just kidding.
Hold on a second. Well, we've been together 9 years, so that's the thing. Like we dated for 5. Yeah. But and I don't recommend that for everybody. And Miss Diana, your mother, wouldn't either. But
yeah, long dating is hard sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. But we had reasons. Anyway, we've only been married. I think it will be 4 this year because it was 2018 we got married. We came from 2 totally different family styles. Yeah. He had a very Christian household. Like they prayed, they read their Bibles together, they did devotionals together, they did Advent, which we'll be doing in Christmas time. We didn't do that. I knew that my mom was saved, but I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
I knew about Jesus. I didn't know who he was. And we would go to church, as I call the Creasters, Christmas and Easter, just the 2 times in the year that's required as someone.
The Creasters.
Oh, yeah.
Can I use that from the platform?
You absolutely can. But totally different. Like, I didn't know anything about God. And actually, the only reason that I got saved was because Adam brought me to church when I met him when we started dating. And he brought me to this church. And, but all that to say, I didn't have someone model prayer for me, and I didn't have someone model what a regular Bible reading time looked like, or, anything that mattered. I didn't, and truly that's what matters most is our relationship with God and how to connect with him. I didn't have someone to teach me any of those things. I didn't have anybody to teach me really what healthy parenting looked like. No shame on my parents. They're awesome, and I've seen God transform their lives since they've, gotten into church, which is great. You've seen it too. Yeah. But I just didn't grow up with that as a kid. And so knowing how to maneuver that point in our life, which will come at some point with us having kids, is how do I do that? I didn't have someone model it for me. I've had to learn as an adult. And so I look forward to these series. And so this is probably good for the younger people too, not just not people with healthy families, not just people who have already got families and they're trying to figure out how to recover, but people who we're looking forward to that point in our life, because this is a good way to prepare ourselves for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's never too early to start.
Yeah.
I remember Tandra and I taking parenting classes before we had kids because we knew we wanted to have kids one day. So we took Growing Kids God's Way. And we were taking classes and people were like, well, what are your kids' names? We don't have kids.
Yeah.
We're like, what are you doing here? It's like, well, we want to have kids. Yeah. I mean,
why not prep
learning
before?
About money before you have money.
That's
come on. It's the same principle.
Yeah.
So we were trying to get prepared and put yourself around families that you see fruit in and just ask them questions. Yeah. I think that's where so many people get it wrong, is the pride keeps us from saying, how do you do this? Yeah. What's that? What does it mean to be a good father? Tell me how you're doing it. People don't want to admit that they don't know. Yeah. And then they instead of just looking stupid for asking, they are stupid for not asking.
Yeah. It's like going to Walmart and you're like, this happens. This doesn't
not wanting
happen
to ask somebody.
Not wanting to ask. And they've got shirts that say, how can I help you?
Yeah.
They want to help.
If they only acted like those buttons on their shirts say, they want to help you.
How can I help you today?
Yeah.
They don't want to help you.
I told you about the time I went to Lowe's.
No.
went to Lowe's with a friend of mine. This guy is like amazing at carpentry and very handy, you know, and I'm just average
Is this
handy.
Adam?
No.
Someone else. Okay.
No, that Adam is very handy, by the way. No, someone else.
I'm
And
sorry.
I wasn't saying their name on purpose, so not to call them out.
Don't. It's
But
fine.
we go in and we're looking for a good 15 minutes for a part. Can't find it. And I'm just like, we're wasting time. I said, well, let me just ask somebody. He was like, no. I'm like, what are you talking about? No. He's like, I probably know more than them. I was like, you don't, because we're still looking.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a person at the end of the aisle, and I was like, let me just go ask them. He was so embarrassed, he went to the other aisle to not be seen with the person asking. And I asked for the part, and within 30 seconds I had it, and we left. And I was just like, you are an idiot.
This feels like Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, where someone comes up at Lowe's and they're like, hey, can I help you? He's like, I know more than you.
I know more than you, yeah. That's kind of how this person possibly had felt. I don't want to assume, but
They may know. If they
that's
listen
how
to this, they're going to know.
Tying this point, and you maybe, what are we talking about Lowe's for?
Yeah.
This is how a lot of people are.
Yeah.
And they're still looking for the part in the store to this day.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for bringing us back.
Okay.
So that's good. I'm excited for the series. And do we have a name for it yet?
Family Ties.
I don't know if you wanted to tell people that, but
Well, you asked, so I got to do it. Family Ties.
you didn't have to. It could have been like, it's a secret.
All right, never forget what you heard.
Forget what you heard. You heard
It's
nothing.
a secret. Thanks for joining us today around the table. We want to invite you into future conversations. We want to feel like you're around the table with us and to be a part of this conversation. So, Lindsay, why don't you give us some ways that they can be connected?
Yeah, if you have any questions, whether it's about something that we discuss here on a sermon, or if you have questions that are about really any topic, you can send your questions to our Instagram or Facebook Messenger. You can email aroundthetable@wearencc.com. You can text table to 903-200-3808, and you can find it on our website, wearencc.com.
Yeah. So subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. If you find this content helpful to you, but yeah, we want to see you around the table next time. So thanks for joining us today.